Find your path with the knowledge of others and become an illuminator for those who struggle. Guide their way just by being true and being in alignment, because it comes naturally to you. On self-discovery wisdom, we share to find inspiration with lessons for millions. We hope you listen.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sara's View of Life right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sara Troy, and this episode is all about my second decade. I decided a little while ago when someone was talking to me and I was saying I'm 71, they said, but that's 7 decades. And I realized, yes, that's 7 decades, 7 times 10. And I decided that I was going to do a show on each decade. I did write my own book a few years ago, Sara's Self-Discovery to Soul Living, their spiritual reflections on stories on the journey to heart and soul loving. So there's a lot more detail and everything that goes into the book. But this is just kind of a synopsis view of the decade. And last week it was my 0 to 10. I think I've done 0 to 10 and now, 0 to 10. And then I did my teens, of course, 10 to 20. And then this is my third decade, which is on my 20s to 30s. And this was a very, very influential year for me. It's the year that kind of made me in many, many ways. There are decades in our lives that quietly pass. And I don't think anything about my life has necessarily been quiet, but there are some that maybe not as packed as this one was. And then there's decades that shape us, and this was one of those decades that shaped me. My 20s were not a gentle unfolding. They were a leap into the unknown, into the world, and into myself. At 20, I did not step out with a clear plan or a mapped out future. I stepped out with curiosity, openness, and with a heart that believed in humanity. And that, as I would come to learn, was both a gift and my lesson. The world was going to be my teacher. I didn't learn from books. I learned from life. Travel opened those doors to me that no classroom ever could. So from Paris to Greece, from Italy to Spain to the United States, the roots of my life in South Africa, having originated from the UK, each life, gifted me something different, something I needed. So, it was my travel decade. I discovered that no matter where we come from, our culture, our language, and our beliefs, we are all seeking the same thing: to love, to be loved, and to live a meaningful life. And there were moments that felt like magic. I am 20 years of age and I want to go and travel. I had gone back and forth from South Africa to England because my sister was there. At 17, I went back and stayed some time with her. But I came back to South Africa, and then it was like, no, I need to go solo. I need to go traveling. And for, the next 2 years, I traveled. I traveled throughout England. I took a bus tour. Actually, first when I started, because that came later. First when I started, I did a 5-stop from South Africa to England. And I went to Greece, and I arrived there in March. Now I'm 20, nearly a half at this point. And things don't really open up until kind of April, Mayish there. So any of the hotels I stayed in, except for the major ones in the city, any on the island, hadn't really opened up yet. So there was no hot water. But I stayed right in Athens, right by the big plaza. I had a wonderful time walking around there, going and walking on the Parthenon, letting my feet feel the Parthenon and the history that was there, the smooth marble and smooth over the time. And to get to there from my hotel, I went through kind of an old district, kind of rickety places where they're selling things. And you had a mixture of old Greece and new modern Greece, which was platform shoes. And I worked my way up to the Parthenon, came back down, and I realized there was a young man that had been following me the whole time. And then I went into the plaza that where you could get a coffee. They served everything there. And the plaza was virtually empty. And this guy came and sat next to me, some young Greek guy. You and I, huh? Huh? You, I. And I go, no, no. I'm married, because I always traveled wearing a ring. And you go, no worry, no worry, no husband yet, no worry. And I go, bambino, I'm pregnant. No worry, no worry. It's okay, it's okay. Says I, kind of pretending to cry. I have syphilis. That guy was gone, blocks away. And so it's funny, he would make love to me, being married and pregnant, but syphilis, he drew the line. And it just made me laugh. It really did. I went over to the island of Crete, and Crete had it really bad in the war. And unfortunately, there were still some people there, because this is mid 70s, still some people there that had a great deal of resentment over Germans. And there were a lot of young German people there. And unfortunately, they were getting a little bit of a cold shoulder because of it. And we can't blame the young, for what their elders did. But there was this lovely little road. I don't even call it a road, an alleyway. And on one side would be this restaurant, and on that side would be that restaurant. And every day I went to one place for breakfast where I'd have an egg that was just huge with dark orange yolk, a chunk of fresh out of the oven bread, blood orange and black coffee. And at night I'd go across the road to the other restaurant where I'd have a tomato that was stuffed with spices and herbs and everything, and a wonderful Greek salad and calamari. And again, lovely bread and, the local wine and then all the entertainment there. And I met other travelers. It was wonderful. And then I moved on to Corfu. Corfu was so beautiful. When you looked at all the rocks, they looked like they were different colors of flaky pastry. And it was really wonderful. And I stayed at a hotel there that did have some tourists, but it wasn't kind of season time yet. But it was so nice to actually have a hot shower, because at this point I hadn't had one in a while. And I was talking to the hotel manager, and he was saying, these Americans, they want coffee, 24/7. And we close our restaurant down. We don't work 24/7. So I said to him, get a machine. Get a machine that makes coffee. They want coffee or tea or pop or something, they can go and get it in the night, and then you don't have to worry about your staff. And he did. And we ended up talking about how he became the hotel manager. Um, and I love maraschino cherries and I love brandy. And they were putting all these maraschino cherries in brandy. And then I wasn't allowed to drink it until the last night. And when I did drink it, oh my God, it was fabulous. And it was a really good experience. Met lots of people, went back to Athens. Um, on the way to Greece, on the flight, this is economy, plenty of leg room, real steak, real knife and forks, real wine. And I'm sitting next to two Greek pilots that are on their way home. And so when I got there, they took me under their wing and they showed me, took me to Greek homes where I was welcomed and wonderful meals, and took me to some ruins. And I went off and did a little bit of sightseeing on other ruins and things. And it really was truly wonderful. I was there a month and it was a fabulous experience. And this was my first experience of being a young woman out on my own. Before, I'd always gone back to my sister or traveled with my mother. Here I'm traveling on my own. And then I go to the last night there. I'm in Corfu. Oh, yes, I rented a car that looked like a little bubble car. And I remember taking a road, which I thought was a road to go to my hotel, and it ended up being the goat's path. And as I'm approaching these houses, they're coming out and going, Yasu, Yasu, hello, hello. And it was so friendly. And then I go past kind of an army camp, and the soldiers go, oh, come over, come over. And the car broke down, that last day. And anyway, the last night there, I'd met a few people, and we do the big dinner and the smashing of the plates. And quite honestly, I just managed to get back to my hotel, grab my clothes, make the ferry to get back to Athens because I'm flying out to Italy that day. So I was feeling a bit rough because I didn't get any sleep, but it was fun. I'm young, right? I get to Italy and we arrive kind of in the middle of the night, and I go to my hotel. I'm tired. I just go to sleep. I wake up at siesta time. The afternoon, everything closes except for, cafes, restaurants, etc. I go into the Via Veneto and I go and have this wonderful pastry, blood orange, lovely black coffee. And I'm watching all these men in kind of green coats walking around. This is kind of April now. And then all these American women that they're approaching, they learn that they are gigolos. And anyway, I'm wandering around, kind of the shops haven't opened yet, so I'm just kind of getting my bearings. And I go and look at this shop window, and it had a kind of, concave and then a tower where all these shoes were in. And I'm looking, and suddenly this woman comes up to me. She pushes me up against the door. And she starts screaming at me in Italian and finishes off with the old, I'm going to slit your throat move. And so then she goes off, and these two guys from the Arab consulate come around and they go, do you speak Italian? I go, no. And he said, do you know what she said? I said, I have no idea. She said, if she catches you in her beat again, she'll kill you. I haven't been in Italy for 24 hours at this point. Anyway, they were very nice and they showed me around Rome and and took me to wonderful restaurants and dined with their friends. I was always very lucky that way. And the Via Veneto steps, I bought a fabulous swimsuit there. I bought a fabulous suede coat. I bought a couple of other gorgeous outfits. I really loved Italy. In fact, so much so I went back two more times. And one time was with a tour, which I'll talk about. Another time I went back for 3 weeks and gained 10 pounds. And that one was still in my 20s. When I went back to that one, I stayed at this hotel just off the Via Veneto, and I knew a crowd of people. We used to go to this one restaurant where we would have fine, fine kind of angel hair pasta with parmesan cheese and petit pois done in butter, delicious. And then at night, eating out was like a full meal. You start off with the cheeses and the salad, then the pasta, then the main course, then the desserts. It's like over 3 hours. Then you go clubbing. And there was a club called Jackio after Jackie Onassis. And I had these huge platform shoes with a stiletto heel. And I went dancing in those. Wow, my feet hurt. Fabulous, loved it, etc. And I'm walking back with my companion back to the hotel. And it's a beautiful night, really, really warm. I've taken my shoes off because my feet could hardly go down on the ground. They were just so sore. And all of a sudden, I see a hand come out of the door, swiping him in. And I go, oh my God, he's been mugged. What's going on? And there is this beautiful woman, only wearing a fur coat, accosting him. And she is one of the local hookers there, very stylish. Anyway, he managed to get himself away from her and walk me home. I go into my hotel, and there's a big kind of foyer with seats and things like this. So you go and get your key and then go off to your room. And I walk in, there's all these men there, and I think, oh, maybe it's a convention and they've arrived late waiting for their rooms or something, because this is something like three o'clock in the morning or whatever. And the guy hands me the key, says, you go to your room and you stay there. You don't come out, not till morning. And I go, why? And all of a sudden, the door swung open, and there is this dominatrix with a cracked whip in leather. And all these men go into a frenzy. And he just said, run. And I ran and I stayed in my room because I wasn't coming out of that. And that was a hotel right off the Via Veneto, not one of those wonderful expensive ones, but that was very interesting. I just loved Rome. I loved the people. I met an ex um, uh, beauty queen, US American beauty queen there who lived there. I met other people from all sorts of cultures, and I loved it. Every time I went back, I loved it. But it's always there was a strike. There was a strike with the airlines. So I couldn't leave when I wanted to leave. There was a strike with the water, and I never get into a shower until the water's turned on, then I get in. So glad I did, because I turned on the water and this sluggy, slimy stuff came out. And then there was another strike with something else. So every time I was there, there was a strike. But I did love Italy. And the food, absolutely, the people, just so full of life. I love Mediterranean people. From there, I went to, did I go? I went to Spain. And in Spain, I met this wonderful woman called Anthea, and I met somebody that I fell in love with called Marcus. Marcus was a Spanish architect, and I'm in Malaga. No, yes, I'm in Malaga. We go to Madrid later. So we fall in love. He's introduced me to a wonderful world. And what was so special about him, I'd had a boyfriend before that, called Grant, that I'd had from 16, and that every time I tried to escape him, he'd have me followed, or he'd come back into my life, and he was so controlling and manipulating. And this man was a bit older than me, and he was somebody that was loving and caring and listened and held and didn't judge. And it was really wonderful. Obviously not to be, extension, but it was wonderful experience. And we would go to Madrid, and in Madrid he had a friend who ran a hotel, and that's where I met Fina. And she was a beautiful woman, half Arabic, half French, just exquisite. And we would go out to dinner. And I had my 21st birthday there. That was kind of a later visit. And I remember Marcus couldn't be with me until the next day. He was in Malaga, he had clients. And I remember being in the hotel, and the hotel manager said, why you look so sad? I said, well, my 21st today. We're going out tomorrow, and he and Athena just took me out everywhere. We went for a wonderful meal. We went to this piano bar where the guy dedicated all these songs to me, and we had a wonderful time. And the next day we all went out and danced, and I had this gorgeous black dress that I loved, and it was wonderful. Then I went to, that was another time in Spain, because I went back to Spain a couple of times. But I went then from Spain, which I loved, over to England and spent some time in England, spent some time with my sister, um, who was still living there, and her children. And my brother was still living there at that time. He had gone back to England to live for a while. He had joined movie school, and so he was in there. He's a few years older than me. And so I stayed with him, either on the couch or spare room, wherever we were. Went out together a lot, met up with cousins that, I hadn't met. And I worked at a place called Tiddy Dolls, a restaurant, and I worked as the hostess, but also the person that would have special gifts for people's events. So somebody had a birthday, an anniversary, or this or that, I had a gift for them. So I was the one to buy the gifts and to arrange the surprise and to give the gift. And it was a lot of fun in that place. But it was in a place, so my boyfriend at the time would come and pick me up late at night when we'd finished. And sometimes I may walk up to the Hilton Hotel and wait for him in the foyer. But it was the time where you have some extremely rich, rich, rich girls whose maybe, parents have cut them off, or the image is rich, but they're not so rich anymore. This is mid-70s, lots of oil crisis and things going on. And, as being call girls. And so you had to be very careful. You had to be escorted, otherwise you'd be picked up. And there was a time where a group of us were taken off to this party, which ended up being, a lot of Arab people. And we knew we were there for one thing, and it was a question of leaving and making sure we managed to get out before we couldn't. So that was always interesting. Had the summer of 75 there in England, and 76, and I met these people. Did I meet them in I met them in 75, American people. He was a high school teacher. She was a university teacher. They lived in Washington, D.C. And I met them, and I borrowed a friend's car and drove them all around London on the 4th of July. And they invited me to America to stay with them. So in September, I went to America. I stayed with them for a while. Then I stayed with a woman that my mother had met on the wonderful train ride between Cape Town and Johannesburg, who is a historian. So I ran her house and cooked and kept it clean for board. And I also worked doing kind of a survey thing. So drove around doing the surveys where I'd meet other people. And this was at the time when Carter was coming in. So a lot of election time going on. And again, it was, very interesting, met some very interesting people there. And kind of fell in love with America because I always felt England was so restrained for me. And I fell in love with America and I knew I wanted to go back. And I was there 6 months and I wanted to go back. I'd been in New York before. No, that came later. That came in 1980, where there's a whole life in between where I went back and stayed with my brother in New York before coming to Canada. And I did that at 25. So that was 5 years later. So I eventually go back to South Africa with the intentions of going back to the States. And then I met my ex-fiance. And I talked a little bit. I know last time I kind of went and bled into my 20s instead of staying in my zeros to tens. But I met him, another tumultuous relationship. He was very possessive and very jealous. I'm reading a book. Why am I talking to him? Going to the bathroom. Why am I not doing that? We got a couple of dogs, and he worked in the movie business as a sound engineer. I was working as a rep. I actually became Mobil Oil's first woman rep. Didn't know a thing about oil, but I've always been able to kind of talk myself into places. And I knew about customer service. I knew about paying attention to customers and what they needed. And unfortunately, I was on a trial run because they would not give me full employment. I had to pass 6 months without being sick with my asthma. Back in those days, you were penalized. And I was doing fine, but a flu went round the entire 400 people. I got sick, of course, it became bronchial asthmatic. And there was a guy my second day there that made advancements to me. And he was married. And I said, no, sorry, I have a boyfriend. No, thank you. And he didn't care. And I said, well, I do. And I had a great boss that I was working with. One day I walk into the office with a big deal and find out my boss has been promoted, and this guy, a weasel, was in his place. And he looked at me smugly and said, well, I'm sorry, we can't extend your employment because you became sick with asthma. Everybody there had fallen sick, everyone. But that was his way of getting me out, penalizing me for not, sleeping with him. So I had made a big deal with this one guy that was had a few shops, and he was using Shell, and I said that we could give him a better deal. And I walked in with that deal, and the guy, basically fired me. And I picked up the phone and I told the other guy to stay with Shell, that we can't give him that deal. And the weasel asked me what company it was, and I told them, and they knew how many outlets they had, I walked out of the office with his jaw dropping. But, I got engaged and we lived together and we worked at various things. And I was living in Johannesburg. And Johannesburg we used to have a nickname for it, Hillbrow Johannesburg, be Hellbrow Jailburg. And I had lived in Johannesburg earlier when I was 17 and I was back there. And, it had very cosmopolitan food and great disco life, fabulous disco life, which with discos was at the height at that point. And I kind of worked hard and played hard. And yeah, my boyfriend and fiance and I broke up because of the possessiveness. And I eventually got to a point where I can't stay there anymore because I was becoming jaded and it was time to move on. And I'd made friends there who were British and they were going back to England. And I read for them as a Messiah. And I said, no, you're going to Canada. And they went to Canada. And so I decided to go see them. And I'm going to be a year in Canada before I go back to the States. And I go over to Canada, hardly any money to my name, find a job under the table. And I meet my ex-husband 5.5 months in. And we had a very tumultuous relationship. And unfortunately, he was, whereas people fell in love with me for my essence and my spirit and my joy of life, my sensuality of life. And then they got incredibly jealous and controlling. And, I was 26. I was ready to settle down, but not marry. I
We
didn't
hope that
kind
you
of believe
enjoyed
in
the show.
marriage. I've
There
seen too
are
many
so
people
many more
divorce.
for you to listen to
And I thought, you're
right
with
here
me
on
because you want to be with me. And we
selfdiscoverywisdom.com.
decided to
Come
have
and
my
hear the
daughter, which I had
illumination
at
that's going to
28.
shed light on your
And
path.
then everybody's saying, oh, you're a bastard, you've got to get married. What if you're kicked out of the country? And we kind of pushed to marry. We had 2 more children after that, but it's a marriage that never should have happened. It's left a lot of scars, physical scars. That's where the fibromyalgia came from. And although, I have forgiven, you can't forget, because it has left me with something that, will be there forever. And that life that we had together of 20 years together, he's Chinese. I met him when he had a restaurant, a pizza restaurant. And I met him actually where I worked. I was working in a French restaurant with a Japanese chef and Chinese owners, and he was friends with the Chinese owner. He'd come into the restaurant and ask me out. I didn't know he was separated at that time. He didn't tell me until somebody told me and I told him. I should have seen the warning flags then. But I was always about giving people the benefit of the doubt. Plus, there was an incredible pull between us. And so it was like, 2 neutrons that shouldn't come together. Also, he is a narcissist and he could be faux charming and talk himself out of anything he'd done wrong and make it feel like it was you and he didn't do anything. So that definitely came into play. And our marriage together was very, very up and down. By 30, I had my second child, which I will cover next time. But I stopped working in the restaurant. I didn't have my green card, so suppose Canadian equivalent, because every time I went to do my papers, they would decline me and we couldn't understand why. And I met another mum at a mum's group whose father was the consulate in England, who worked for the Canadian consulate, and she suggested I had to leave the country. I went with my 2 children at that point, that's in the 30s, but he's the one that helped me get my permanent residency. And he's saying that because I'd lived in South Africa, they would penalize me because it was all about apartheid at that time. But so I was always living here just, under a work permit at that point, not even permanent residency. But, my daughter taught my husband how to love in a big way because I would see him coming up the driveway and I'd put her on the ground so that when he opened the door, she'd crawl towards him. And he learned how to love through her. But still, there was still too much insecurity in him. And yes, he was one of 7 children. He was the fourth. Mother was very childlike and very demanding, very browbeating. And he had become the same. And it was just, a bad marriage. And I know he played around. And so he left me with 3 beautiful children. When I asked for a divorce, he blamed a woman who had removed some past lifetimes for me and blamed her for losing control over me. And I said, that's the reason for the divorce, because I'm not here to be controlled. And I took my power back, but it was a journey and it was a tough journey. And so I'm in my 30s at that point, but in our 20s, we were, I don't know if we were ever in love, not even in lust. There was just something there that was an attraction that we couldn't walk away from, although I tried many times. It would pull back. And then we would have these good times and then these dreadful times. And it was just a roller coaster. And yeah, a rocky road, a very rocky road. So that was the rest of my 20s there. And I'm living now in Vancouver. And he sold the restaurant when I became pregnant with my son, which was when I am turning 30. So at 29, we sold the restaurant. He went into real estate because I was going to the restaurant with my youngster and doing books and working. And she would, she was so funny. She kind of opened up a hand and waggle into the kitchen to go, cheese, cheese, cheese. She loved cheese. And everybody just, the one thing about having children of two different cultures, the Western softened the Oriental, and the Oriental defined the Western. And I do have three very beautiful children. And so that was a great gift. And eventually the other gift was me through struggle and trial and tribulation is finding myself. So, it was always about me trying to find to fit in. So now I'm on this discovery of self. And that's my other journey that came up later. I would say the 20s, which was all full of that travel. And yes, I did this tour from England. And unfortunately, it was full of Australians and South Africans. I wanted to be on this tour where I'd meet other people from other cultures, um, and we would stop at various places. And I was hooked up with this girl um, whose husband was a diamond dealer in South Africa. She'd drink 2 liters of Coke a night. She didn't have any of her own teeth. She's only 24. She would charge her husband for sex with a diamond. We had to pay her a diamond. And she was so innocent. We were in the red light district, just walking through, kind of fascinated in Amsterdam. And she would go up to the people, how much do you charge? How much are you going to pay? I mean, just completely ignorant, very sheltered life, which was quite extraordinary. Um, but we went to places that I knew I wouldn't go to on my own because I really preferred the metropolitan places. So we went through Austria, which was lovely. Went with journey. We went on the River Rhine on a boat, which was lovely, seeing castles either side. Beautiful sunny day, nice warm sun on us, gentle wind, and all these castles. That was lovely. And we went to Amsterdam, which I'd been to a few times and have been back since. And, just kind of crossing things off the path. But I wanted Spain, I wanted Italy, I wanted Greece because I'd like those Mediterranean countries because of the full of life, and I wanted something that was lively. And I loved my summer in London in 75. It was fun, a lot of fun. I got to play a lot, I got to meet a lot of people, I got to live a lot, and it was just very, very exciting. And and then, of course, leading me to America, where I worked, where I met other people. I do actually have one story that the couple I was staying with, they had relatives that were in government. We went to this party, and they're finding me fascinating. And do I have a shrink? And no, I don't. Oh, well, you can have mine. You can have to go to mine. You can't live without a shrink. And I can. I work out my own problems. I don't go to shrinks. I had in the past, but they always ended up on the couch. I always ended up counseling them. So anyway, they thought this was absolutely catastrophic because they don't make a decision about anything in their life. These were decision makers in the government, mind you, but they didn't make a decision in their life without talking to their shrink. And I'm always a person that follows my gut, my instincts, my intuition. But when they found out that I had worked in the theater, that I was, kind of a theater brat, well, that was just too much for them. They couldn't have one of me there. And I was asked to leave, even though I came with, one of their relatives. It was quite fascinating. Um, but yes, I did meet some people there that were wonderful. When I stayed with the historian woman, there was one story. I borrowed a car. She was in Maryland, to go into the city, into Washington for the day, and I met someone for lunch. It was very nice. And I'm coming home and I take a wrong path. And I'm on the street and it's quite wide, and I know I'm nowhere near the highway. And I see a couple of guys standing there, and I wind down my window And yes, there are people of color. So I decided not to be South African at that point because I didn't know how they were in apartheid. I decided just to be British. And so I tell them that I'm extremely lost. Would they be kind enough to guide me to the highway? And next thing I know, there's a bunch of guys there all wearing very heavy chains. And I just carried on being ditzy blonde, British girl. I love your country. I'm having such a wonderful experience. This is so exciting. But I really, I've got to get my friend's car back, and I just don't know where I am. And they escorted me to the highway. I got back, and my friend was worried about me. No cell phones in those days, guys. I'm behind time. And she has a friend there who is a cop. And he said to me, "You went where?" And I said, "Well, it's down this route, and these guys helped me, and but they were wearing all these chains." And he said, "You survived that?" He said, "The cops don't go down. That's where the gangs are. That's where the violence is. Nobody goes down there." And he was flabbergasted that I had been escorted out friendly and shown the highway. And I think that has always been something I've done in many things in my life, is just stepped into the ditzy, and I'm no threat to you. I'm appealing for your help. And it hasn't worked on lovers, but it did work on situations and places that I had been in, and definitely got me out of trouble. Um, but yes, I got bit on the face by the dog once. I was playing with it. I thought it was awake, but apparently it was asleep with its eyes open, and it bit my face. So I had to go to hospital and they just put those bandage stitches on me. And the dog was just really kind of nervous around me until I had to chastise the dog and then forgive the dog for the dog to feel comfortable. But the other thing, it had a beautiful Burmese cat. And this cat was an indoor cat. Now, I lived in England and South Africa. We didn't have indoor cats. Cats were outside. They came in and out as they want. They ruled the world. And one day the cat got out, and she is frantic. She is worried as hell. And we've got everybody looking for the cat. She's imagining all the worst. The cat had gone into the garage and found a box to sleep in. But I never heard of indoor cats before. And she hadn't told me either. She just thought it was an assumption. But I lived there for about 3 months through the winter, and had a boyfriend at the point, kind of a boyfriend. But yeah, it was very, very interesting. Then back to South Africa. And then that is when I met my ex-fiance, and the tumultuous relationship there. And it was working. Thing about Johannesburg, you could have at 3 o'clock these hailstones just coming down like rocks. People would run out and put blankets on their cars. You had to be careful. It was halter time. You had to be careful that you didn't get cut on your back. And it would be warm, and just hailstones. But you could go to work in a parka in the morning, be freezing, be in a halter top in the afternoon, and then back in a mid-level coat in the early evening. The weather was so extreme there because it was high up on the mountains. My fiance's father worked for BOSS, Bureau of State Security. He was Afrikaans. He was still fighting the Boer War, hated the British, hated me, had me followed around, and had investigation on all of my family because I was British. And, that was a war that had been like 50 years prior. Um, but it was very, very interesting. So yes, I've done things. I've been the dancer, I've been the model, I have worked in retail, I have worked in fashion stores, I've worked in restaurants, I've worked as a rep. I'd done an awful lot of things, and for me, it was always about the adventure and what's next. And so it was always about trying something new. I mean, I tried to be a secretary once and realized very quickly I couldn't do that. Um, and so, trial and tribulation, but I lived. I had a dog called Lena. I loved my Lena. She was beautiful. And unfortunately, when I came to leave, my sister took her. And then my sister and her husband divorced, and she put Lena with the other dogs in a kennel for a year. She was a beautiful young dog, a tricolor collie, instead of giving her to another family, which I begged them to do. And then they had all the dogs put down. It broke my heart. I felt so guilty. I should have given Lena to someone else, but I trusted her with with my sister, and it was heartbreaking. But my 20s were definitely about the travel. I had wonderful highs. Met Sean Connery, met a number of other people. I did a great deal of going to the theater. I would dress up and go to a five-star restaurant on my own, not to pick anybody up, but because why wait for someone to take you out for dinner? You can take yourself out for dinner, which I still do today. And I would enjoy a good meal. I would people watch and then go home or go off and do something. I'd go to the theater on my own, sometimes with people, but I've never let it hold me back. I am more nervous about joining a crowd that's already in process. I prefer more intimate conversations with smaller people, smaller groups of people. But I used to know all the people in ballet. There was one time um, this gentleman from England brought over famous ballet dancers to do a recital. And there was jealousy with the current ballet people there. And I arrived wearing a beautiful long gown, and my toe was bandaged because my nail had half ripped up. And the impresario turned to me and said, Sara, please, would you get up there and do spotlighting? They've sabotaged us and they won't work. And we need, people in. And you'd hear their soundtrack and they'd turn the soundtrack off. And the ballet dancer would just walk off, come back on when the music was on and perform. And this was just all spite from the original dancers there. I had never done spotlight before. There I am with this dress hunched up to my hips, my toe throbbing, trying to follow the light. No rehearsal, just trying to follow the dancer where they're going. And yeah, quite extraordinary. My brother and I did a lot together. We used to take our dog Candy, a border collie that we took over from England when we went to South Africa, and we would go looking for apple pie, drive along the coastal front, and just have a wonderful time, stopping, walking on beaches, um, and just looking for apple pies. And one New Year's Day, I went to friends in the morning, and we dug for mussels underneath the rocks, and we had, mussels for breakfast. And then in that evening, I went to Simonstown and had fresh fish and fresh lobster and fresh everything else. It was just, the food was utterly divine in Cape Town, divine. In South Africa altogether, I don't know what it's like now, but then absolutely wonderful. And, you had the two oceans meet. And, Muizenberg would be warm, but the Clifton side of it would be ice cold. And there was one time my brother and I are out swimming, and we've been just treading water, and the water's absolutely still, and all of a sudden the current changes, and the waves are coming in, and I can't move. I've kind of frozen. I can't move. So my brother's grabbing me by my hair, trying to pull me in, and I can't move my body. And there's another time I went to a naked beach where people go and get naked, and I went along. I never took bottoms off, but top, yes. And I went out for a swim, and a freak wave hit me, pulled me down. And then next thing you know, I've been carried by the shoulders and been carried by the legs, and I'm upside down as they take me out of the water. And as they turn me over, I'm splattering water, but I'm laughing. And they're, kind of trying to make sure I can breathe, and I'm coughing and I'm laughing. And they go, "What are you laughing at?" And I just said, "Dingle, dangle, dingle, dangle," because two naked people picking you up when you're upside down was quite a view. And one day the police, I had to work that day. I was doing a modeling gig, and the police raided the place. You had to drive an hour to get to that place. You had to walk 25 minutes over rocks to get to that beach. And then people would claim complain about it, the pious ones. And they did a raid and arrested all these people. And they arrested the chief of police that had been going there for 20 years. So ridiculous. My boyfriend at the time had this Messerschmitt, the Spitfires cockpit were made into cars, three-wheelers, and that could take us everywhere into the small gaps and things, and that was fun. So I had a lot of joy in Cape Town. not a great deal in luck in love. Again, I loved too hard. Um, I gave of myself too hard, and and then came the control. It was always about the control, always about the restraint, and I couldn't be restrained. That would kill me. It's like clipping my wings. And with my fiance, people were saying to me, Sarah, what's happened to you? You're a shell of yourself. And I had to leave. And but I had to leave while he was on a gig and wait for him to get home because he threatened to commit suicide if I left. And he was in the middle of making a movie. So that was more complicated. But yeah, just as my kid says, you just can't pick a mum. It's the reason why I've been single for the last 10, 12 years. Anyway, that was my 20s, and there's a lot more stories in there, a lot more fun. I loved my mother and I would go away on holiday together. We would hold dinner parties together. We loved entertaining. We would do potlucks, which we loved to do. And we would go out and meet for lunch. We loved fashion. We would just do a lot together. And we remember once we went to this one hotel and I'd been working very, very hard. And so the first day there, I'm just lying in the water, just relaxing. I could literally sleep on the water. And that night, you could feel the heat from my body. You could probably fry an egg on it. And I had just got so severely burnt, like peeling skin off me for weeks after. And um, but we had disco. We met people. Just my mum and I traveled very well together. We went to the San Juan Islands together, not the San Juan Islands, Maur Mauritius together. Wonderful time in this fabulous hotel. Um, I met Deirdre Barnard, Dr. Chris Barnard's daughter, who's the first heart transplant doctor. Met him too, and I just wonderful time to be myself. And my mum had, discovered herself as well. Pearls and tweeds are gone, long flowing dresses, just, enjoying life. And so there were some wonderful moments in that time of discovery and freedom and expression. And I love the fact that we did get dressed up to go out for dinner, whether it was a beautiful caftan or, that was the thing about it, just hot weather. You wore beautiful, colorful clothes, loose and flowing, and, just a lot of that and a lot of beaching and just a good life. It was a very good life. But as I said, when I went to Johannesburg, things just got jaded and I just felt I can't go back to Cape Town. My wings, wanted to fly. I wanted to go and explore other places. And that's how I ended up here in Canada. And I've been here now nearly 46 years with three children and three grandchildren and one step granddaughter. So life is interesting. So next week will be third decade, 20s to 30s. And that was an interesting year, interesting decade. Another child, um, opened up a dress store. Lots of things happened during that time, which I will discover next week. But I'm only touching the tip of the iceberg. And of course, my book. It is my perspective. It is my view of life. It's, not digging into all the problems. It's that looking at it at hindsight now, and all the things that I've had to overcome. And loneliness was one, a lot, because that loneliness was always about never feeling I fitted in and never seen for who I was. And that's something I had to deal with. And it's how I became the writer of articles, and how I found my voice. And that's been an extraordinary journey in itself. But there was a lot more in the 20s. It's disco season. In an era, I would go discoing. We'd already done the mobile discoing. I'm no longer doing that, but I'm going to discos. I'd go to 3 or 4 movies a week. We didn't have TV. And I would go to live shows, live ballet, live performances, live theatre, dine out a great deal. Life was always about out. And Johannesburg, you live mostly in apartments around a pool. So you'd be down in the pool. I'd be swimming with snakes curled up around me. They're very interesting. It's just like if you take a bottle and go like that, they're very smooth. They're not slimy at all. Um, and just experiencing life, experiencing different cultures, up and down, not everything good, and some things, witnessing murders and shootings and stabbings and attempt on my own life, all of it. But life and living, which in a couple of other decades, I felt I was only existing. So even though it had its ups and downs, I definitely did live. And I was this beautiful free spirit. And then I came here, met my ex, and slowly my wings would be clipped again. So until next time, folks, this is Sara's life. If you're interested in my book, it's on the show page, but you can go to Amazon and just put in Sara Troy, Saratroy, and you'll see all the books I've been in. My book, the book I produced, Our Forgotten Children, and all the other books that I'm in, and the book that we produced here on Self-Discovery Wisdom. So until next time, what has your decades taught you? Have you looked back and reflected? It's interesting to look back. It's interesting to remind yourself the spirit that you once were, the spirit you can be today. I'm a different spirit today. I am calmer, more rounded, more encompassing, more at peace, not such busy chasing. But I do kind of miss that girl that just had exuberance for life and a physicalness that could do it. I don't have that anymore. And I really did push the envelope. I did explore. I did spread my wings, and I miss her. So anyway, until next time, folks, remember, the journey to becoming you is done one decade at a time. Bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you to listen to right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Come and hear the illumination that's going to shed light on your path.
Find your path with the knowledge of others.